Freestyle Travel. Hey everybody, this is the Freestyle Travel Show, and I'm your host Kenny Flannery, and this episode is going to be about beer and brewing. I've been wanting to do this episode for a little while. Beer is pretty important to all of humanity. It's actually a documentary out there called How Beer Saved the World, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but with a lot of fact-based knowledge, dropping it on you, letting you know how beer pretty much invented roads, the written language, and everything else in society. Pretty much. It's responsible for a lot. Beer is important, but I'm going to get into how it's important related to travel and also brewing, because you can't make beer unless you brew it. So I'll get into that. How I learned how to brew, how I brew on the road, and I don't always get to drink it, but yeah, I'll get into that. Since the last episode, I am still in the midst of the Kickstarter for the Bivy Pack. That's what the last episode was about. If you want to know what that's about, listen to the episode. It's a backpack that turns into a tent. I just hit the goal yesterday, so it is 100% funded. And as I'm speaking, there's a little bit less than a week left where it's still going to be on Kickstarter. So I imagine it's going to get a little bit above the goal. It's already about $1,000 over. It's right under 11,000 right now with a $10,000 goal. So I'm going to be making a lot of backpacks. It's pretty much how that all spells out. So I'm excited about that. If you're listening to this right when it comes out, you want to check it out, Kickstarter's still up. Just go to Kickstarter and search for Bivy Pack, Bivy-Pack, backpack that turns into a tent. So yeah, yesterday that just hit. But since the last episode, I believe I was recording that. Yeah, I was recording that in Biloxi, Mississippi. And then I hitched on over to Mobile, Alabama, which isn't all that far away. Take a sip of beer here real quick. This is an episode about beer, after all. I'm drinking Wiseacre. Gotta get up to get down, coffee milk stout. It's actually a Memphis, Tennessee beer. So I kind of have a rule about only drinking beers from the state that I'm in, if I'm in the U.S., or from the country that I'm in, if I'm elsewhere. But Mississippi's a little bit rough, so options are limited. I'll get into that a little more. But yeah, I hitchhiked to Mobile. Went to a brewery there, actually called Cyderobin, and tried some of their stuff. But this girl I met a couple weeks ago, I talked about going to New Orleans with her. Her name's Liz, and this unicorn fella from Pensacola, and a banjo player. You got to listen to an episode or two back to hear that whole story of the freaking wildness that went on in New Orleans. New Orleans always has something in store, and that was no exception. So anyways, she's living in Mobile. She's doing the marijuana march there on 420. So if you're in town there, you can go do that. So that's what she's there doing. So I went over. I might do an episode with her, actually. We almost did one. So I went over there, hung out with her, and she was kind of staying with these two other girls right at Pritchard, Alabama, actually. It's basically Mobile. So I was hanging out with the three of them and just skipping around town, seeing what's what, just trying to get out of Mississippi, really, and then seeing what Mobile was about. Got into a lot of shenanigans, as per usual. Lots of good bars, that one brewery, freaking acid trip art walks. Lost my phone for a day or two. Got it back. I was with some dude that we had met and were hanging out with, and left at his place. Thank goodness for that little Android feature, Find Your Phone, because the next morning or afternoon, when I woke up, I was like, don't have my phone. That's a concern. But I got online, luckily, and I saw that it was 100% charged and on the main street in Mobile, and I was like, that's probably where that dude lived that we were scatterbraining around at last night. So sure enough, it was there. It took a day or two to actually get it and track it down. I had his debit card too. Liz had his keyboard, and he had my phone. It was like just a big weird confusion switcheroo, just because, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff going on that night, so everything got mixed up. Figured that out. Yeah, generally had a really good time hanging out with her, hanging out in Mobile, seeing the scene, seeing how her whole marijuana march is coming together, and just, productivity begets productivity. So I was feeling good, change of pace. And then I was going to hitchhike on out of there one morning, and her essentially roommate, I don't know what it is, like one of her friends was just like, I'll give you a ride. And that turned into a long, drawn out day of waiting for that ride. But I got a ride back to Biloxi, and here I am again. Been back here for 2 or 3 days. I'm thinking of going to Mobile again, maybe tomorrow. Just sticking my thumb out, getting there for St. Patrick's Day, or maybe going there and launching off from there to Pensacola or somewhere. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's how it always goes. One day at a time. But yeah, like I said, the goal hit for the Kickstarter, so I was super stoked, and since then I've been feeling even more productive. It's just one less thing to think about. Is it going to hit? Is it not? So I've made a lot of improvements with the backpack, just little itty bitty things that wouldn't sound like much if I talked about it here, but just hip belt placement and shoulder strap stuff, and yeah, stuff I'm excited about. That's going to make the bag better. And it just, cleared up my mind to do some of those things and work on a couple other things. So that's all going well. And a lot more to come. Like I said, one more week of that Kickstarter until it's complete. A couple weeks, the money will clear, can start ordering stuff and just going crazy making backpacks. So that's going to be what it's going to be. But let's talk about beer, shall we? Here we go. Beer. So, as many of you know, any human being, beer is probably the most important thing on the planet. It's kind of hard to argue, and while you're traveling, that's no exception. I got into, everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people will just drink to drink, whether you're drinking beer, vodka, whiskey, whatever, and did a little bit of that. Not a ton, like in high school or anything. And, not even a ton when I went to school after high school. But eventually, drinking beers here and there, I started getting into better beers. And for a while, I thought I was really drinking good beer because I was drinking like Guinness and Stella and a freaking Blue Moon. It's like, I don't drink that Budweiser shit. I still don't try to drink crappy beers too much. But especially once I got on the road, I started drinking like actual good beers. And I was like, wow, there's lots of levels to this. And one day I had hitched a ride. Actually, a truck driver picked me up in Pennsylvania, and he was going all the way he was going everywhere. He was going from Pennsylvania through Ohio to Denver to Vegas to San Diego to San Francisco. And he's like, you can ride as short or as long as you want. So I rode with him as far as Denver, couch surfed with a guy there, and that guy's roommate was brewing beer in the kitchen. So naturally, I was curious because I hadn't seen that before, and it was just like, I never even really just thought about that beer had to be made. Like everything has to be made, but there it was going on, making a 5-gallon batch there. So asked a lot of questions, got really into it. And then ever since then, just kind of snowballed into more of an obsession. And just by seeing that he was brewing beer, I started paying more attention to beers that were being made. And while traveling, it's a great thing because there's breweries everywhere, and it's particularly exploded kind of in line with when I started traveling 10 years ago. It's really gotten to be a big thing. The reason why it means even more when traveling is there's 2 angles to this. All right, so one angle is you're offered drinks and you're put into a lot of like party-ish situations when you're traveling just because you're meeting people for the first time. It's an easy thing to, where are we going to do? What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? Let's go to a bar, or let's go have a beer, or there's an event going on. Or you're like seeing friends for the first time in months or a year or something. And you're like, let's go grab some beers. Like, so you end up drinking quite a bit. Got to keep an eye on it, I guess. But it happens. So a lot of drinking goes on when you're traveling. Those people don't drink at all. There's some kind of discipline thing. I don't know. I got to Google it. Figure that one out. But so gotta take another sip of beer here. Like I said, I'm drinking this Wiseacre coffee stout. It's not too bad. Got a couple beers brewing too. I'll get into that in a second too. But yeah, so that's the one angle of that, is that when you're traveling, there's lots of opportunities to drink or celebrate or fill that like not awkward moments, but just, you know, like I said, you're meeting people, you're having dinner, you're having a drink. So the other thing that I look at, which is maybe more of just something I've discovered a little bit, is that breweries are very great places to land when you get to a city to meet people, find things out. And the people who hang out at breweries are generally pretty interesting and informative and community driven. The whole brewing culture on a whole is pretty community driven. There's a metaphor I like to quote a lot, and it's that high tide raises all ships. And the brewing community is a perfect example of that. People like to share, they like to collaborate on recipes, and if there's one brewery in town, great, but if there's 5 or 10 breweries in a town, all the breweries do better, because then the whole town, it becomes a thing. Like craft beer becomes a thing, and then people notice, and then they're going to all the breweries just more. That's kind of how the whole thing has leaned. So anyways, cool people hang out at breweries usually. So I've a lot of times when I'll go to a town or a city that I've never been to, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know where I'm staying that night, or maybe I do, but I'm not meeting up. That's option A. Look up the best brewery, go there, and just see what happens. I've had people take me in for the night, you know, because I sit down with a backpack, and it's an easy conversation starter for someone else. They can look over, see my backpack. It's the case with a lot of bars, but brewery counts as one of those situations. So I've had people take me in. I've had people give me good advice on places to eat or places to camp, things to see, places to go next. Yeah, a lot of things can happen. So there's that aspect of it. And there's the aspect of beer being freaking delicious. And I've had people, you know, buy me beers and stuff like that too, of course. That can happen. So yeah, I like to go to breweries for both those reasons. A, like beer is delicious, and you know, B, you meet all these interesting people and possibly fall into these situations where all of a sudden you have a place to stay, that kind of thing. And also it's kind of a mission. Like I said, one of my rules is trying to drink beer as local as possible, and not for sustainability reasons. I mean, whatever, that's great. Beer doesn't travel much, the carbon footprint, blah, whatever. That's whatever, that's cool. But I do it because when am I going to get a chance to drink that beer again? Breweries pop up a lot. Like for a while, people thought this whole brewery thing was going to be like a bubble. You know, like how can all these breweries keep popping up? They're not going to be able to sustain. But the way I look at it is like bakeries. Breweries can pop up like bakeries. Not every brewery is trying to be the next Sam Adams or Sierra Nevada. Not even every brewery bottles or cans at all. Like you go there and you get the beer there, and it's the only place you can do it. So that's why I try to drink beer from nearby, because I can drink a good Sierra Nevada beer anywhere. And, you know, that's my fallback, like Sierra Nevada, if there's no good beer. Like right now I'm drinking a beer from Tennessee because there's not a lot of great beer in Mississippi. And I've, you know, been here off and on for the last little bit. So I've tried most of the good stuff that's easily accessible, at least right here. So I can't just keep drinking the same. There's one from Hattiesburg that's pretty good, but I can't keep drinking that Crowd Control IPA every single day. I got to mix it up a little bit. So yeah, I try to stick by that. It doesn't always work, and craft beer, good beer, is expensive. So if I'm feeling broke or there's just no real good beer options, I personally default to a PBR just because it's not offensive. It's usually pretty damn cheap. If you ever find a can of PBR for $4, you are in crazy town. Usually a can of that stuff's like $1 or $2. So that's my personal go-to. But yeah, when it comes to craft beer being expensive, it's definitely my luxury item. Some people like, I don't know, jumping out of planes. Some people like theater. I like beer. So man, if there's a really good beer and I'm still feeling a little bit broke or whatever, like, I will spend $8 on a beer at a bar, and then I will do laps around a city for like an hour and a half to save a quarter on freaking taco, like, that's just how I am. I'll spend, $1.50 on a taco that I like basically did lapping around blocks research to find, and then spend $8 on a freaking delicious Russian Imperial stout that was barrel aged. Oh, sounds good. So yeah, with that, let me transition into brewing, because naturally liking beer so much, I got into brewing a lot whenever I can, and it's tricky on the road. So let me give you guys, some of y'all listening probably know how to brew beer, but I'm sure a lot of you don't. So I'll give you a quick little thing on how beer is made. Basically, beer just has 4 ingredients, one of which is water. The other ones are like barley, grains, hops, and then yeast. So to make beer, essentially what you do is you make a tea out of the grains. You just steep the grains in that water, basically, and all that's doing, hot water, not boiling, but hot, and basically it's just converting the starch in the grains to sugar, because later the yeast is going to eat that sugar, and the yeast eats the sugar and outputs alcohol and carbonation. So yeah, you steep these grains, take the grains out, and then you boil that liquid, that water, sugary water now, with hops. And by boiling the hops, you get the bitterness out of the hops and some of the flavors, and do that for about an hour. And then you cool it down, the whole thing. And once it's cooled down, you can put the yeast in there, and you put it into a bucket or some kind of container on a small homebrew kind of scale. Like if you're brewing 5 gallons, that's what a lot of people brew. Cool it down, throw in the yeast, and then it just sits for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes longer. And it's sitting that long because the yeast is now eating that sugar that you converted from the starch by steeping the grains, and creating alcohol. And once it's done doing that, it's alcoholic, but it's not carbonated, so you can bottle it at that point. You add a little bit more sugar, you seal the bottles up, and then the yeast eats that little sugar you added, adds the carbonation, and after a couple weeks, boom, you got carbonated, alcoholic, hopefully delicious beer. So that's really a simple way to put it. And it's cool that I've been able to travel around and meet a bunch of people who are brewing, or convince them that they should be brewing, and then they get equipment. So I've gotten to brew on quite a few little homebrew systems. I've brewed in people's kitchens, all the way up to way more elaborate things where people's garages are basically small breweries, essentially. It's pretty fun, but if you didn't zone out while I was saying the process there, it takes a while. The actual brewing process itself is 3 or 4 hours or something, including the cleaning. But for it to sit around and ferment, that's a couple weeks, and then to bottle, it's basically like a month from the time you brew it to when you actually get to drink it. So if you've listened to this podcast and you know me, I very rarely stay in one place for that long. So a lot of times I've showed people how to brew, or I've just got to join them while they were brewing, and then I'm gone. And then I don't ever get to try the beer. So sometimes I try to brew stronger beers that'll age a little bit better. I've learned that. I was staying at my buddy Larry's place in Phoenix, and we've brewed several times. Usually when I go there, we'll brew. And he pulled out this beer one of the last times I was there. And he's like, look, we were drinking some good, off the shelf beers and stuff. And then he pulled out this one beer from the fridge. He's like, look what I got. And it was an unmarked bottle, and bottle cap I kind of recognized. I was like, is that the IPA we brewed like 2 years ago? He's like, yup. All excited about it. And it was terrible, because beers like that are meant to be drank fresh. It was kind of the equivalent of like pulling orange juice out of a cabinet that was half full, that had been sitting there for 2 years. Like, here we go. So I've kind of learned the lesson that with people that I know I'm going to see frequently, if I'm going to brew beer with them, I try to brew something strong, like a like a hearty 10% stout. That's what I always do with my brother. Brew these like 10, 11% viciously awesome stouts. And then they age well. So then if I don't happen to come through there again for another year or two, that beer is going to be good. It's like, everyone knows that about wine. Like, wine ages really well, but some beers do as well. Now you know that. I always wonder who's listening. How many beer people are listening to my podcast? You guys are probably like, yep, probably drinking a beer right now. I can smell it. I gotta take another sip of this beer. I'm just holding it. So, I am actually taking advantage right now, being in Mississippi, doing this whole Kickstarter thing. I'm trying to bounce in and out of here as much as possible just to keep my sanity, but also I'm brewing here. So there's one beer that just bottled a couple days ago, a little hoppy brown ale, like 7%, and then this abominable snowman white stout, which is it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to end up being like 10 or 11%. Just this big old stout, pale color. It's for those of y'all who don't drink beer, just picture like something that smells and tastes like a Guinness, but looks like a Blue Moon. It's just a mind fuck of a beer. Some people who even know beer haven't had a white stout. It's a weird one. So I've never brewed one before. I'm excited about this one. Just put some oak in there. Added some cocoa nibs today. Gonna add coffee later. It's just these tricks to get it to this like roasty, chocolatey stout flavor without altering the color. I'm really excited about it. I'm like tasting it right now, just thinking about it. So yeah, that's kind of how brewing works, and it gives you an appreciation when you're tripping around and you do see breweries, because it's all over the world now. So obviously in the United States, anyone here, like even in little small towns, you'll see some breweries popping up, but it's getting pretty big, craft beer in Italy right now. Spain as well. The Netherlands is blowing up. Germany is slowly coming along. I know they're known for being a beer country, but they're kind of stubborn in their ways. I've talked about this before, but they're slowly getting to it. Czech Republic, you can find some gems in there for sure. Around Prague. I was down in South America. It's still real slow going, at least where I was in Colombia and Ecuador. Didn't dig enough anywhere in Peru, but man, the worst beer I've ever had in my life I had in Medellin, Colombia. It was bad. It tasted like nail polish remover. It wasn't like Budweiser, Coors Light, just like piss water bad. It was bad, like poison bad. I'd instantly start Googling stuff just to find out like what went wrong with that beer. I think they fermented it too hot or something. They must have been fermenting it at like 95 degrees Fahrenheit or something. I don't know. It was bad, but at least they're trying. There was a hostel in Buga, Colombia, which is just south of Cali, Colombia, and it was cool. I talked to the brewer quite a bit. And it seemed like he just wanted to, he's a German guy, he wanted to start brewing down there and then just sort of incidentally open up this hostel. Like he had a lot of space and just kind of made sense to do something with the space and make a little extra money. And it was cheap. It was all really cheap. I don't know. It was like, maybe it was less than $10 a night for a bunk, and beers were like $1 or $2, and not bad. So there's gems to be found anywhere and everywhere. I'm excited to get down to Chile and Argentina maybe later this year. I've heard there's good stuff going on there as well in the beer world. So I've got there's so much beer. My mind's just jumping all over the place. I was about to say, like, if you don't like beer, you can tune out, but you probably already did. So it's just us beer lovers now. I can say what I want. I have a friend in Portland, and he went to Portland, at least at that time, had I believe it was 80 breweries. I think he went to 50 breweries in a day. And then a year or two later, he went to 80 breweries in one day. And I believe his strategy was that the first one he went to, he got a pint. The last one, he got a pint. And in the middle of the day, he got a pint. And then all the other ones, he got like a little sampler glass, basically, just to not die of alcohol poisoning. And had it all mapped out, everything good to go. People assisting him along the way. Just crushed it. I mean, Portland's one of the beer capitals of the world. I'm sure they would argue they are the beer capital, but yeah, San Diego might have something to say about that, and other places maybe. But that's a great beer town. I'm hoping to swing through there later this year too. I got a lot of stuff I want to do once I get done with this Kickstarter thing. It's just going to be an explosion. Yeah, just want an excuse to talk about beer. Really, you guys, that's what this is. Mississippi's, like I said, a little bit rough. It's cool that I'm getting the chance to brew some of my own beer while I'm here. I haven't got to have any yet. A couple weeks away. That brown ale will be the first one to dive into. But I did want to talk about it, not just because I want to talk about it, but also because it is an integral part of traveling. Whether you like beer or not, it's freaking everywhere, and it is cool to see the difference in beer culture from one place to another. And getting back to that one point, there's been so many times where I've gone to a brewery and wound up like staying with someone. Like when I was traveling with this girl Michelle, it happened to us several times. One time at a brewery called Mud Shark. Where is it? It was like the California-Arizona border. I should remember that town. Was it Havasu? Something like that. We were just there, sipping a beer. Choose to my left. I started talking to someone to my right. She started talking to some dude to her left. Next thing I knew, I joined their conversation, and that dude's fucking running us all around town, buying beers for us everywhere, giving us a place to stay in his like huge-ass house. We had nowhere to stay. But then we did, so we stayed with him, woke up, got on our way. Later with that same girl, we were up in Minneapolis, Summit Brewing. Same thing. I started talking to some dude at the bar, and he had just moved to town, really loved beer, was actually trying to get a job at that brewery. He gave us a place to stay that night too, and he had a fridge full of delicious frickin' beer. So we just nerded out on beer, all of us, that night. 3 of us plus some friends kicking around. Yeah, it happens quite a bit. Leavenworth, Washington, the middle of that state, I went and went straight to a brewery. Sure enough, they told me places to camp. Later, I went back to that brewery and had my backpack. These 2 girls walked up to me and just asked me point blank if I was hitchhiking. Just saw me in the backpack and just... They had been hitchhiking that last summer, so it was just on their mind. And I was like, yeah, I have. Next thing you know, I'm talking with them and all their friends, and I stayed with them for several days. And I'm still in touch with them. I've seen them a bunch of times since then. Yeah, friends in all over the place now. Because beer, the most beautiful thing on the planet. I could almost cry, but I could just take a sip of beer too. It's a beautiful thing. If you don't like beer, the fact that you listen through all this means you should probably get into it. Alright, yeah, that's all I got to say about beer for now. Good old beer. Well, I'm glad I got that episode out. And I'd love to join any of y'all for a beer. Anytime, anywhere. You can always hit me up. You know where to find me. At this point, Hobo Lifestyle anywhere. Whether it's a .com, a Facebook, a Twitter, an Instagram. Freestyle travel show. Supported not by ads, but Amazon affiliate programs. Yeah, if you need to get something on Amazon, take a look at hobolifestyle.com. Look at the gear page. I got a bunch of stuff I recommend. But yeah, I'm part of the affiliate program there. So if you click through and you get something on Amazon, there's something I suggest or not, I get a little cut of that, which is cool. You could get some beer stuff. You can get some homebrew. You can get some good homebrew stuff on Amazon, actually. I've got a motor. I've got a pretty sweet beer system over here now. Yeah, you can get little motors. You can get anything. It's freaking Amazon. It's basically just gateway to whatever. Yep. So, next episode, maybe I'll talk to Liz about the marijuana march, because that's coming up. Just trying to legalize weed in Alabama. I think it's gonna be pretty easy. Like, everyone that I talk to in Alabama, like, nobody, I think it's like the whole country. Like, there's very, very few people that actually care about, like, marijuana being illegal. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing that's illegal in the first place, but whatever, you know. You still got to do a bunch of stuff. It was made illegal, so it's got to be made legal again. Whatever. I'll talk to her about that. Yeah, so, and that's kind of my plan. St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and I'm gonna blast off for it. It's gonna be fun. All right, you guys, keep drinking good beer, and I will see you down the road.
I need a new escape. With all my shit straight, I'll get my big break.